The Weekly Wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Claire Kimball.
And I'm Jodie Spears.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese spent 6 days across Shanghai, Beijing and Chengdu. It's his longest overseas visit to any one country since he became our national leader in 2022. It was a very important gesture to making it a long trip.
And an important one given our recent strained relationship. The headline is that he met with the big three of Chinese leadership, President Xi Jinping, of course, Premier Li Qiang and Communist Party Chair Zhao Leji. Apologies for my subpar pronunciations.
You did better than I ever could. So.
He was also accompanied by a business delegation and his fiancée, Jodie Hayden, who looked to be having a lovely time, judging by the photos.
Yep, she did. And look, let's get into what came out of it. China's committed to providing Australia with advanced notice of any military exercises. Of course, this came up and really was in the spotlight in February. There was an incident there where Chinese warships did live fire drills just off our coast. Commercial flights had to be diverted at that time. It was quite a thing.
Yeah, it was. A heads up on that sort of thing is generally appreciated. Albanese also raised the case of detained Australian writer Yang Hengjun, though he said that he didn't expect any immediate progress there, which is basically diplomatic speak for we talked about it, but don't hold your breath.
The major focus was trade and economic opportunities. The program was packed with very high-level business meetings aimed at getting our businesses really through the front door. China's state media was very enthusiastic about it all.
Yeah, it was. I always like diving into what the local media have had to say about things, and there was a lot of airtime given to this visit by Albanese. China's media is, we could say, quite controlled.
Yep.
So there weren't going to be bad reviews, but the Global Times described it as showing that Australia had a clearer judgment and understanding of China than under the previous Morrison government.
Yeah, very subtle, that comparison. From the Australian side, Albanese described the 8 hours of meetings that he had with those leaders as really constructive. There were some complications, though. The biggest one was around Taiwan. To mention Chinese state media again, they reported that Albanese assured Xi that Australia doesn't support Taiwanese independence, and that caused a real stir with the Aussie media.
Yeah, when pressed about it, Albanese clarified that he supports the one China policy and the status quo. I think we should just pause here for a second, Claire, to explain what Australia's position actually is, because there's been a fair bit of confusion this week. And I reckon we might even take the opportunity to take a step even further back. A refresher never hurts. So, Claire, let's go back to the Chinese Civil War of the 1940s.
Yeah, when we say take a step back, we're
fair
back
few
at
steps.
the 1940s. And that is when the Communist Party under Mao Zedong was fighting the nationalist government that was led by Chiang Kai-shek. When the communists won that civil war in China in 1949, Chiang and about 2 million of his supporters fled to Taiwan, and they set up what they called the Republic of China. And for decades, both Beijing and those who were set up in Taiwan claimed to be the legitimate government of all of China.
Fast forward over the next 40 years and Taiwan became a democracy in the 1990s, and the situation then got a bit more complicated because once you had democracy and free elections, then people started asking whether they actually wanted to be a part of China at all.
Yeah, exactly right. And these days, the Taiwanese people aren't keen on unification with China, but they're not rushing towards independence either, because that would likely trigger some kind of military response from Beijing. And I've got some numbers to back that up. There was a big poll done about 18 months ago, and it found that less than 5% of Taiwan's public supports any sort of declaration of independence, while about 90% support the status quo, as they call it.
So any nation with a relationship with China has to navigate this. Australia and most of the world acknowledge what's called the One China policy. We recognise Beijing as the sole legal government of China and acknowledge their position that Taiwan is part of China.
Yet we don't formally recognise Taiwan as any sort of nation, and actually most nations don't, but we do maintain what they call unofficial ties. So we do trade. We actually import quite a few technology and manufactured goods from Taiwan. They've got a real specialty in that. There's also cultural exchanges and a lot of people-to-people stuff.
It's a bit of diplomatic juggling, really. So to the status quo bit that Albanese mentioned, that means we support no changes by either side. That means China not using force to take Taiwan, but Taiwan also not declaring that formal independence. Everyone just kind of stays where they are.
Exactly. So that's what that is all about. The trick, of course, in all of this too, is that President Xi is really, really keen, dead set keen on what he calls reunification. And the fear is that China will try and take Taiwan by force. Xi has said that that could happen. So you can see why things got a little bit complicated for Albanese this week. And he just touched down in Shanghai when he was asked about reports that there were United States defence officials who were pressuring Australia and Japan to clarify what we would do if the United States went to war over Taiwan.
Yeah, that's even though the US hasn't been clear that it would go to war with China if it invaded Taiwan. The timing was pretty awkward. Albanese and China making nice while all of that unfolded.
Yeah, and look, while we're down this rabbit hole, something else to note is that Coalition's new defence spokesman is Angus Taylor. He's not the shadow treasurer anymore. He's now in that defence portfolio. He broke with previous Liberal Party policy on that this week. He said that Australia should commit to protecting Taiwan's security.
So up until now, the coalition has been on a joint ticket with Labor. In the middle of the week, Taylor went on ABC's 7:30 and said that while it's not possible to codify how a conflict might unfold, you can make those principled commitments as part of an alliance.
Yeah, so a pretty big change there. Yet this conversation keeps coming back to how do we balance our biggest trading partner in China with our biggest and most important security ally.